There is a country on your map right now that has been conquered more times than almost any nation on earth. Its capital was burned to the ground. Its armies were shattered by the Greeks, by the Arabs, by the Turks, by the Mongols. Foreign kings sat on its throne and declared its old world dead. Its very name was erased, and every single time, something strange happened. The conquerors won the war, and then slowly, quietly, they became the thing they had conquered. They started speaking its language, wearing its clothes, ruling the way its kings had ruled. Within a few generations, you could barely tell the victors from the defeated. That country is Iran, the land the ancient world called Persia. For 3,000 years, empires have risen with a single dream, to swallow this place whole, and one after another they have failed. Not because Persia always had the bigger army, usually it didn't, but because you cannot kill an idea by killing the people who carry it. And Persia was, before anything else, an idea. This is the story of the nation that can't be destroyed. How a people older than the pyramids gave the world its first true superpower, its calendar, maybe even its idea of heaven and hell, lost everything again and again, and refused every time to vanish. To understand how that is even possible, we have to go back, further than Rome, further than Greece, further even than Egypt. Here is the first thing almost everyone gets wrong about Iran. They start the story too late. Most tellings begin around 550 BC with a man named Cyrus. But by the time Cyrus was born, the land he would come to rule was already unimaginably old. There were cities on the Iranian plateau that had been standing, rising, falling, and rising again for thousands of years before the first Persian king ever picked up a sword. Go to the southwest of Iran, to a region called Khuzestan, and you find the ruins of a city called Susa. People were living there around 4,200 BC. Let that number sit for a moment. That is before the Great Pyramid of Giza was built. That is before Egypt was even a single unified kingdom. When the first pharaohs were being crowned along the Nile, Susa was already an old city. And Susa was the beating heart of a civilization most people have never even heard of. It was called Elam. The Elamites were one of the oldest civilizations on the planet, rising at the very same time as Sumer, in the land right next door. They built temples shaped like artificial mountains. They developed one of the earliest writing systems on Earth, a script that, to this day, we still cannot fully read. There are Elamite words pressed into wet clay more than 4,000 years ago that no living human being can translate. For more than 2,000 years, Elam rose and fell against the great powers of Mesopotamia, Sumer, Akkad, Babylon. Sometimes they were crushed, and sometimes they were the ones doing the crushing. At the height of their power, Elamite armies marched into Mesopotamia and carried the treasures of their enemies back home across the mountains. One of those treasures was a tall pillar of black stone, carved top to bottom with the laws of a Babylonian king named Hammurabi, the most famous law code of the entire ancient world. The Elamites took it as a war trophy, and that is exactly where it was found more than 3,000 years later. Not in Babylon at all, but in the ruins of Susa in Iran. This is the soil that Persia grew out of, not empty land, not a blank page, a place already layered deep with the memory of empires that had come and gone. But the Elamites are only half of this story, because sometime around 4,000 years ago, a new kind of people began drifting down onto the Iranian plateau from the open grasslands of the north. Herders and horsemen speaking a related family of languages, and they called themselves a name that would echo for the next 4,000 years. They called themselves Aryan, Arya. In their own tongue, it simply meant something like the noble ones. Our people. Hold on to that word because you already know it, even if you know it for all the wrong reasons. The name of the country itself, Iran, comes directly from it. Iran quite literally means the land of the Aryans. Not in the poisoned, twisted sense that a group of men in the 20th century would later force onto that word. In its first and original sense, simply the land of these tribes, who had arrived on the plateau and made it their home. Two of those tribes matter more than all the others. One called themselves the Medes. The other called themselves the Persians. The Medes came first. They settled in the northwest and built a capital at Ecbatana, a city so wealthy that legend claimed it was ringed by 7 great walls, each one painted a different color. The innermost 2 plated in silver and in gold. And the Medes did something no one had managed to do for centuries. They helped bring down Assyria. You have to understand what Assyria was to feel the weight of that. Assyria was the nightmare of the ancient world, an empire that ruled through deliberate, calculated cruelty, that skinned its enemies alive and then bragged about it in carvings on its palace walls. For 300 years, every people in the region lived in fear of the Assyrian war machine. And then, in 612 BC, the Medes marched on the Assyrian capital of Nineveh alongside their Babylonian allies, and they burned it to the ground. The most feared empire on earth simply stopped existing. The people of the Iranian plateau had just toppled a superpower, and they were only getting started. Because living in the shadow of the Medes was that other tribe, smaller, quieter, ruled by a modest line of kings down in the south, in a region called Persis. And one of those southern kings was about to have a grandson, a boy wrapped in a strange prophecy, who would change the shape of the entire world. His name was Cyrus. Before we follow Cyrus onto the battlefield, you need to understand something invisible that these people carried inside them. Because Persia did not conquer the world with cavalry and iron alone. It conquered with an idea. And that idea began with a single man, a prophet who may have lived long before Cyrus was ever born. His name was Zarathustra. In the West, we call him Zoroaster. And nobody can tell you for certain when he lived. Some place him around 600 BC. Others push him back 1,000 years further into the deep mist of the plateau. But what he taught was so strange and so powerful that it would quietly reshape the spiritual imagination of half the human race. Look at the religions of the ancient world before Zoroaster, and almost everywhere you find the same picture. A crowd of gods, jealous and quarreling, and time itself moving in circles, endless seasons, endless cycles, a wheel that turned forever and went nowhere. History had no direction. It simply repeated. Zoroaster broke the wheel. He taught that there was one supreme, wise creator, Ahura Mazda, the Lord of Wisdom. That the whole universe was the stage for a single vast battle between 2 forces. Truth and the lie, light and darkness, good and evil. That every human being in every small choice was a soldier in that war, free to choose a side. And here's the revolutionary part. He taught that the story was going somewhere. That time had a beginning, a middle, and an end. That one day there would be a final reckoning. The dead would rise, each soul would be judged for what it had done, and in the end, good would win. Stop and listen to that list again. One God, a cosmic struggle between good and evil, free will, heaven and hell, a final judgment, the resurrection of the dead, a savior who comes at the end of time. If those ideas sound familiar, they should, because many scholars believe this is a large part of where they began. During the years the Jewish people spent in exile, living under Persian rule, they stood shoulder to shoulder with a culture soaked in these beliefs. And the parallels that appear in the centuries afterward, the devil as the great adversary, armies of angels and demons, an end of days, a Messiah still to come, are very hard to simply wave away. Through Judaism, those ideas would flow into Christianity and later into Islam, which means the way billions of people alive right now picture heaven, hell, and the end of the world may trace back, at least in part, to a prophet standing on the Iranian plateau thousands of years ago. That is what I mean when I say Persia invented time. They took the endless wheel and they bent it into an arrow flying toward a purpose. And they did not stop at the philosophy of time. They mastered the measurement of it. The Persians became some of the finest astronomers and calendar makers in all of history. Their new year, Nowruz, is set to the exact instant of the spring equinox, the precise moment the sun crosses the celestial equator, and it has been celebrated, unbroken, for around 3,000 years. Hundreds of millions of people still gather for it. And centuries later, a Persian poet and mathematician named Omar Khayyam would help design a calendar so accurate that by some measures, it drifts less than the very calendar most of the world keeps on its wall today. Let me pause here for just a second. Because if you have followed this story all the way here, back before Egypt, into a lost civilization, and a prophet who rewired the way we see time itself, then you already understand what this channel is. Every single day, we take the tidy version of history you were handed in school, and we push on it, hard, right at the places where it doesn't quite hold. If that is your kind of thing, subscribe and come dig with us. There is a certain kind of person who would rather sit with a real, complicated truth than a clean and comfortable myth. I think that is you. Now, hold all of that in your mind at once. A people who believed history was a story with a direction, who believed they each had a part to play in a cosmic fight between light and darkness. Give a belief like that to the right leader at the right moment, and it becomes something far more dangerous than any weapon. And the right leader had just arrived, because Cyrus was about to take a small, half-forgotten kingdom in the south and turn it into the largest empire the world had ever seen. And he was going to do it inside a single human lifetime. Cyrus began with almost nothing. A minor king in the south, technically a subject of his own grandfather, the Median monarch. And around 550 BC, he did the unthinkable. He rebelled and he won. The Medes did not so much lose to Cyrus as switch sides to him. Overnight, Persian and Mede became one people under one crown. And then he simply did not stop. He turned west and swallowed the kingdom of Lydia, ruled by Croesus, a name that was, for centuries, a synonym for wealth itself. All that gold flowed to Persia. Then he turned toward the greatest city on earth, Babylon, the superpower of the age. And in 539 BC, Babylon fell to him almost without a fight. By the Persian account, he walked in as a liberator, and the gates simply opened. And here Cyrus did something that would define the entire Persian idea of empire. He did not raze the city. He did not drag its gods away in chains the way conquerors had always done before him. He announced that the peoples held captive in Babylon were free to go home and worship however they pleased. Among those peoples were the Jews, held in exile for generations. Cyrus let them return to Jerusalem and rebuild their temple. Open the Hebrew Bible, and you will find a Persian king, Cyrus, called God's anointed, his Messiah. It is the only time in that entire book a foreign emperor is given the title. This was the Persian model, and it was genuinely radical. Most empires ruled by erasing you. Persia ruled by letting you stay yourself, your gods, your language, your customs, so long as you paid your taxes and kept the peace. It was, in a sense, the first real attempt at a multinational empire. Hold on to that thought, because later we are going to test just how true it really was. Cyrus died around 530 BC, out on the wild eastern frontier, fighting nomads. His son added Egypt to the empire, and then the crown passed to the man who would carry Persia to its absolute peak, Darius. Darius the Great was not, first and foremost, a conqueror. He was an organizer, perhaps the finest administrator the ancient world ever produced. He took this vast, half-chaotic patchwork of conquered lands, and he engineered it into a machine. He carved the empire into provinces called satrapies, each with its own governor, but each one watched by roving royal inspectors, the people nicknamed the eyes and ears of the king. He built the Royal Road, a highway running some 1,700 miles from the Aegean coast deep into the heart of Iran, with fresh horses waiting in relay at stations along the way. A royal message could cross the whole empire in about a week, a speed that would not be matched in that part of the world for 1,000 years. It was the Persian courier that the Greek historian Herodotus was describing when he wrote the words you might recognize from the wall of your local post office, that neither snow nor rain, nor heat, nor gloom of night would stay them from their course. He minted a standard gold coin. He backed a single common language for administration across the whole realm. He began cutting a canal to link the Nile to the Red Sea, a Suez Canal, 24 centuries ahead of schedule. And he raised a ceremonial capital so magnificent that even its shattered ruins go quiet on you today. Persepolis. And now, the number. At its height around 480 BC, the Persian Empire ruled something close to 44% of every human being alive on the planet. Very roughly 49 million people, out of a world of about 112 million. Sit with that for a moment. Nearly 1 out of every 2 people on Earth lived under a single crown. By that measure, share of all living humanity, it is the largest empire that has ever existed. Before or since, half the world, one king. There was only one place the tide ever truly stopped. Far to the west, a scattering of small, stubborn Greek city-states refused to bend. At Marathon, and then at a narrow pass called Thermopylae, and in the Straits of Salamis, the Persians ran into something they had not planned for, and their great invasions of Greece broke apart. At the time, it looked like a footnote, a rich empire, briefly embarrassed at the far edge of its map. But the Greeks did not forget. And 150 years later, in a poor, rocky little kingdom to the north of Greece that Persia had barely bothered to notice, a boy was born who would turn that old grudge into the end of the Persian world. His name was Alexander. Alexander was everything the late Persian court was not. Young, restless, half-wild, raised in the rough highlands of Macedon, and tutored as a boy by the philosopher Aristotle himself. From his murdered father, he inherited a new kind of army, a professional, drilled war machine built around the long spear and the crushing cavalry charge. And in 334 BC, barely into his 20s, he led it across into Asia to do what the Greeks had dreamed of for a century and a half, to make Persia pay. What followed is one of the most astonishing campaigns in human history. In just a few years, Alexander tore through the Western Empire. At a river called the Granicus, he broke the local Persian forces. At Issus, he came face to face with the Persian king himself, Darius III, and shattered his army so completely that Darius fled the field, leaving his own mother, his wife, and his children behind in Alexander's camp. By now, the empire that had ruled half the world was reeling. Darius offered Alexander a fortune and half of the empire just to stop. Alexander refused. He wanted all of it. The end came in 331 BC on a dusty plain called Gaugamela. Darius assembled a vast army, everything the empire could still gather, and Alexander, badly outnumbered, took it apart with a single screaming cavalry charge aimed straight at the king. Once again, Darius ran, but this time there was nowhere left to run. He was murdered on the road by one of his own governors. A final, squalid end for the royal line of Cyrus. When Alexander caught up to the body, the story goes, he covered it with his own cloak. Then he marched into the ceremonial heart of the empire. Persepolis, the dream of Darius the Great, the throne city of the King of Kings. And Persepolis burned. To this day, we argue about why. Some ancient writers say it was a drunken feast gone wild, that a Greek woman stood up and dared the conqueror to torch the palace, as revenge for the burning of Athens a century and a half earlier. Others say it was cold politics, a signal to the world that the old order was over. Either way, the greatest palace complex of the ancient world went up in flames, and the glow could be seen for miles. The Greeks, at long last, had their revenge, and that should be the end of the story. The Persian Empire, conquered and burned by a foreigner. But this is the exact moment Iran does the thing it always does, because Alexander won the war. And then Persia, quietly, began to win him. The young conqueror fell under the spell of the very thing he had destroyed. Aristotle, his old teacher, had reportedly urged him to rule the Persians the way a master rules his slaves. Alexander did almost the opposite. He began wearing Persian royal dress. He adopted the ceremony of the Persian court, including the custom of bowing before the king, which horrified his rough Macedonian soldiers, men who had followed him to the ends of the earth and now watched him turn into an Eastern monarch before their eyes. He married a Persian noblewoman, Roxana. Then he took a daughter of the dead King Darius as a wife as well. And at the city of Susa, he staged something extraordinary, a mass wedding in which thousands of his own officers were married, all at once, to Persian and Iranian brides. A deliberate attempt to fuse two peoples into one. He had come to conquer Persia. He was ending up trying to become its emperor. His own men never quite forgave him for it, and in 323 BC, back in Babylon, that ancient seat of Persian power, Alexander suddenly fell ill and died. He was 32 years old. The largest empire the world had ever seen, he left to no one. Within a single generation, his squabbling generals tore it to pieces. But look closely at what he had proven, without ever meaning to. You could smash the Persian state. You could burn its palaces and kill its king and scatter its treasure. And still its culture, its court, its entire way of being a great power would reach up and pull the conqueror in until he was dressing like them, marrying into them, ruling like them. Alexander was only the first to learn that lesson. Over the next 1,000 years, it would be taught again and again and again to Greeks, to a resurgent line of Persian kings, and finally to a people who came riding out of the desert carrying a brand new religion and an absolute certainty that they were the ones who would change everything. They were about to find out who really changes whom. For a while, Greek kings ruled Persia, the heirs of Alexander's generals. But it was a thin coat of paint over a Persian world, and it did not last. Out of the northeast rode an Iranian people called the Parthians, and they threw the Greeks out and rebuilt the empire under a Persian line of their own. The Parthians became Rome's great nightmare in the east. When the Roman general Crassus, one of the richest men who ever lived, invaded, the Parthians annihilated his legions at Carrhae and killed him. Their horsemen perfected a trick still buried in our language, galloping away in fake retreat, then twisting in the saddle to fire arrows backward into the men chasing them. We still call a last remark thrown over the shoulder a parting shot. For nearly 3 centuries, Rome, conqueror of the whole Mediterranean, threw itself at Persia and could never hold it. Then in 224 AD, a new dynasty rose from the south with a burning purpose, to restore the glory of Cyrus and Darius. These were the Sassanids. They made Zoroastrianism the state religion again, rebuilt a centralized Persian empire, and for 400 years stood as one of the 2 superpowers of the entire world, toe-to-toe with Rome and then Byzantium. One Sassanid king, Shapur, even captured a Roman emperor alive, and had the humiliation carved into a cliff, where you can still see it today, the ruler of Rome, kneeling before the Persian king of kings. This was Persia at full strength again, 1,000 years after Cyrus. And then 2 things happened almost at once. Persia and Byzantium fought a final ruinous war that dragged on for 26 years and left both empires bankrupt and bleeding. And in that exact window, out of the deserts of Arabia, came something no one had seen coming. A new faith. Islam. The Arab armies that swept north were driven by a conviction the tired old empires could not match. At a battle called Qadisiyah, around 636 AD, they broke the Sassanid army. Within a few years, an empire 4 centuries old simply collapsed. The last Persian king fled east across his own crumbling realm and was murdered alone by a miller who wanted his jewels. Zoroastrian Persia, the empire of the King of Kings, was over. Conquered by a foreign people, carrying a foreign god, writing in a foreign tongue. Surely this time that was the end. It was not. It was the single greatest performance of the trick this whole story is about. Because Persia did not vanish into the Islamic world. Persia reached into the Islamic world and rebuilt it from the inside. Persians became the administrators, the bureaucrats, the viziers who actually ran the vast new empire. When a new dynasty, the Abbasids, built their capital at Baghdad, right beside the ruins of the old Persian imperial city, they ruled in an unmistakably Persian style. And the great flowering that followed the Islamic Golden Age was to an enormous degree a Persian achievement. A scholar from Persia named Al-Khwarizmi gave us the word, and the science of algebra. And the word algorithm is simply his name, worn down by 1,000 years. A Persian named Ibn Sina wrote a medical encyclopedia that Europe would still be studying 6 centuries later. Persian poets, Rumi, Khayyam, Hafez, would be memorized and wept over by people who never set foot in Iran. And then the language itself came back from the dead. Around the year 1000, a poet named Ferdowsi sat down and spent 30 years writing the Shahnameh, the Book of Kings, some 50,000 couplets telling the whole saga of Persia, and doing it deliberately in pure Persian, refusing the Arabic words of the conquerors. It is said he revived a nation with a pen. He may well have. Even the next wave proved the point. When Turkish horsemen poured out of Central Asia and seized power, they did not erase Persia either. They took its language as the tongue of their courts, its poetry, its entire art of kingship, and then carried Persian culture outward until it stretched, in time, from Turkey all the way to India. Greek, Arab, Turk. 3 conquerors. 3 times the same strange gravity, pulling the victor in and quietly dressing him in Persian clothes. But far out on the eastern grasslands, something was gathering that would not be pulled in. Something that did not want to rule Persia. It wanted to erase it from the face of the earth. It was coming on horseback, in numbers no one had ever seen, and it was almost here. They came because of an insult. In the early 1200s, the ruler of the empire that then governed Persia made a catastrophic mistake. He seized a Mongol trade caravan and executed the envoys Genghis Khan had sent to demand justice. Genghis did not send another letter. He sent everything he had. What followed is one of the darkest chapters in all of human history. The Mongols did not fight the way other armies fought. When a city resisted, they did not simply take it. They erased it, and everyone inside it, as a message to the next city down the road. In the great Persian cities of the east, Nishapur, Merv, Ray, Herat, the killing reached a scale the medieval mind could barely take down on paper. Chroniclers wrote of pyramids built out of human skulls, of cities of hundreds of thousands, reduced in a matter of days to silence and ash. The Mongols even smashed the ancient irrigation channels that made the dry land livable, so that the dying did not stop when the soldiers rode away. Some historians believe Iran's population may have fallen by half or more. This was not conquest. This was something closer to extinction. If Persia was ever going to disappear from the earth, it was now. And then it got worse. A generation later, Genghis's grandson, Hulagu, came to finish what his grandfather had started. On his way, he stormed the legendary mountain fortress of the Assassins at Alamut, a secretive order of killers that had terrified kings for 150 years. Then in 1258, he reached Baghdad, the shining capital of the Islamic world, the seat of the Caliph himself, and he broke it. The libraries were thrown into the river. It was said the Tigris ran black with the ink of 1,000,000 books and red with blood. The last caliph was rolled in a carpet and trampled to death by horses. Half a millennium of the Islamic Golden Age ended in a single week, and Hulagu settled in to rule the ruins, founding a Mongol state over Iran. Now, watch what happens, because Persia had one weapon left, the only one it had ever truly needed: time. Within 2 generations, the impossible happened again. The grandsons of the men who had raised the skull pyramids began to change. The Mongol ruler, Ghazan Khan, converted to Islam, took a Muslim name, and became a devoted patron of Persian art, Persian learning, Persian government. His chief minister, a Persian, sat down and wrote one of the first true world histories ever attempted, in Persian. The conquerors who had come to wipe Persia off the map were now paying for its mosques, its poetry, its libraries. It had happened again. Even the next horror followed the script. At the close of the 1300s, another world conqueror, Timur, the one the West calls Tamerlane, swept through and piled up his own mountains of the dead. And Timur, too, poured the plunder of half the world into a Persian-speaking court, and his descendants became some of the greatest patrons Persian art has ever had. And then, out of all this blood and recovery, modern Iran was finally born. In the year 1501, a fierce young leader named Ismail seized power and founded the Safavid dynasty. For the first time since the Arab conquest, nearly 9 centuries before, Persia was reunited as a single independent state, with borders that look, on a map, remarkably like the Iran of today. But Ismail did one more thing, and it is the reason Iran still stands apart from its neighbors right now, 500 years later. He made one specific branch of Islam, Twelver Shia Islam, the official religion of the state, and drove its adoption across the entire country. It also lit a long, bitter rivalry with the Sunni Ottomans to the west that would burn for centuries. That single decision set Iran on its own road forever. A great Shia power, distinct and often alone in a mostly Sunni Muslim world, carrying an identity that none of its neighbors shared. Under the Safavids, the city of Isfahan grew so beautiful that Persians made up a phrase for it that survives to this day. Isfahan is half the world. Persia had done it one more time. It had been invaded, massacred, very nearly wiped from existence, and it had come back. Not as a memory, as a nation, with a face we would still recognize. But the next threat would not come riding in from the steppe with swords. It would arrive slowly, wearing a suit, carrying contracts and gunboats and maps. And this time, the fight would not be over Persia's land. It would be over Persia's name. By the 1700s, the great Safavid state had collapsed, and Persia entered a long twilight. A new dynasty, the Qajars, took the throne, but they took it into the age of European empire, and Persia was no longer the one doing the conquering. Now it was the prize. From the north pressed Russia, from the south pressed Britain, and Persia, caught between them, was slowly pulled apart, not swallowed, but squeezed. It lost its lands in the Caucasus to Russia in a pair of humiliating treaties. It signed away its tobacco and then its oil to foreign companies for a fraction of their worth. In 1901, Britain secured the rights to Persian oil and built the company that would one day be called BP. The empire that had once ruled half of humanity was now buried in debt, its wealth mortgaged, its kings pushed around by foreign ambassadors. Persia never quite became a colony. Almost alone among its neighbors, it kept its independence. But in the eyes of the world, the word Persia had quietly changed its meaning. It no longer meant power. It meant carpets and cats and old poetry. A beautiful, faded thing. The superpower had become a museum. And then in 1925, a hard-eyed military officer named Reza Khan seized the throne, crowned himself Shah, and set out to drag the country by force into the modern age. He built roads, railways, schools. And in 1935, he made one particular demand that speaks to this whole story. He told the world to stop calling his country Persia. From now on, he said, it would be known by the name its own people had used for it for thousands of years: Iran, the land of the Aryans. He meant it as a rebirth, a modern nation naming itself on its own terms, reaching straight back past the weak Qajar centuries to its most ancient roots. But here's the strange, sad irony of it. In the West, the word Persia carried 3,000 years of magic. Cyrus, Darius, the poets, the splendor. And by trading it for Iran, the country accidentally cut that thread in the outside world's mind. Worse, the word Aryan in that exact decade was being poisoned by other men in Europe for the darkest purpose in human history. A nation had reached for its oldest, truest name, and much of the world simply forgot who it had once been. In a way, this was the one erasure that partly worked, not by the sword, by a single word. The century that followed came fast and hard. In 1953, Iran's own elected leader tried to take back its oil from Britain and was toppled in a coup organized by British and American intelligence, a betrayal Iranians have never forgotten. In 1979, the anger finally boiled over. The Shah was swept away, and a monarchy that reached all the way back to Cyrus, 2,500 years of kings, was replaced almost overnight by an Islamic republic. Look at what just happened. One more time. The whole order flipped, king to cleric, palace to mosque, and still, it was Iran. The same land, the same people, the same deep and stubborn certainty about who they were, wearing yet another new skin. That is the pattern this entire story has been circling. Zoroastrian, then Muslim, Achaemenid, then Sassanid, then Safavid, then Pahlavi, then Republic, Persian, then Iranian. The government changes, the religion changes, even the name changes, and every single time some conqueror or reformer stands over this country and declares that now at last the old thing is dead, it never is. Because you cannot burn down an idea about who you are. They tried it with fire at Persepolis. They tried it with slaughter under the Mongols. They tried it with a new god, a new alphabet, a new name. And the columns of Persepolis are still standing in the desert tonight, scorched, broken, 25 centuries old, and still unmistakably Persian. The next empire that decides this nation can be erased should probably read the last 3,000 years first. If you made it this far, you already know this isn't the kind of channel that's going anywhere. We put out something like this every single day, the version of the story that survives contact with the actual evidence. Subscribing keeps you in that loop. And if this one stayed with you, send it to 5 people who'd sit through something this long with you. Not everyone will. Some people do. Leave a comment. A real one. Tell me what part of this actually surprised you. And tell me what civilization, what forgotten site, what quiet piece of hidden history you want us to look at next. We'll be here tomorrow, still digging.